Hello and welcome to Niaga Spotlight with me, Tehmina Kaoosji. Niaga Spotlight goes to the week in business and future affairs. Market watch, analysis, industries and insights. We've got you covered right here on Niaga Spotlight. Well, this week on analysis, we're looking at gender balance in boardrooms. Now, of course, to wrap off International Women's Month, we thought it was just timely to look at how Malaysia is faring, in particular when it comes to women's representation in the boardroom. It is also interesting that according to WEF, the World Economic Forum's 2023 report on gender, we actually ranked roughly at about 102 out of 146 countries. So, plenty to be done, and also interestingly enough, it's going to actually take 169 years to close the gender economic gap. So, to discuss all related issues when it comes to representing and having more women in boardrooms in Malaysia, I have the absolute pleasure of joining me in the studios today, Nurul and Abdul Latif, who is Executive Chair with PwC Malaysia and also the newly ushered in chairperson for 30% Club Malaysia. Puan Nurul, how are you today? Thank you so much for making time to join us.
Hi Tehmina, nice to be here.
Fantastic. So Nurul, if we could get started by me, of course, touching upon the fact that you are the newly appointed chair for 30% Club Malaysia. Tell us a little more about your role and what the objectives are for 30% Club when it comes to the rest of the year ahead.
Okay. The 30% Club is a business-led campaign which champions the subject of diversity, equity and inclusion, focusing on gender equality in the boardroom and the C-suite. Our objective is very easy. It is to try to inspire conversations and discussion about how important gender diversity is in the boardroom, and more so to support coming up with the pipeline for women leaders going forward.
Exactly. So it's all about not only having enough women, but at the same time making sure that we don't stagnate, right?
Yes.
So I was also very interested to note that overall, globally, it's still estimated women hold only roughly about 23% of all board positions. But at the same time, Malaysia-wise, we actually have been doing quite well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
The latest statistics which we have shows that for the top 100 PLCs, I think we are doing very well. On a net basis, we have exceeded the threshold of 30%. But it is not the same case for the other 850 PLCs where we are still below.
Fair
so
enough.
There is a lot more work to be done. What is interesting statistics, I know there are many numbers and percentages flying around about how well we are doing. But we took the liberty to look at the top 100 PLCs, and disappointingly, there is only 2 PLCs where CEOs are women, right? That statistics actually show that there is a lot more to go as it relates to senior management level.
Fair enough, because of course, not just senior management, but then comes the next step of actually getting to be on a board.
Yes.
And I think we'll go into deeper details for that, because those are actually some of the requirements that many of our board directorship positions come with, right?
Yep.
Nurul, from there, I think it was interesting that according to data provided by Securities Commission Malaysia, as of 1st January 2024, as you were mentioning, so women hold about 30.9% of board seats for the top 100 PLCs. At the same time, though, we also do have roughly about 20 or so PLCs which have 0 women on their boards at the same time. So I wanted to ask you about this because this is also a topic that has sometimes come up when we look at board membership in general, looking at the pool of available candidates. Just like in Malaysia, we do have plenty of men on, of course, all the boards, but we often see repetitions. So meaning which you will have board members for a certain PLC, but they will be repeatedly seen across the sphere for many other PLCs.
Yep.
Are we seeing that for the landscape when it comes to women on boards?
It's a good thing that there are restrictions in terms of how many boards a director can sit on. But as you mentioned, yes, we still see the same person sitting on other boards. At the moment, we do see that it's across the board. It's not just a male issue. I think it's also the female where we see them sitting on 2 or 3 boards. And how do we address this issue to have a better pipeline for women leaders or potential female board members going forward.
Exactly. Now, it's also interesting that actually 30% Club's target for 30% women on boards was actually 31st of December 2023. However, it did happen about 6 months ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
So what would you say are some of the initiatives 30% Club Malaysia is looking forward to for the next few quarters of the year?
Yeah, I think one, when I first, got appointed as the role, what I realized is that, the 30% Club is instrumental in terms of, number one, garnering the discussion about how important DEI policies are in organizations. We do have about 60 members of the club, and we are continuously advocating more and more organizations to be part of the 30% Club. And I think with these members, the idea is that, we learn from each other. We share with each other what are, our own practices within the organization, so as everyone would, everyone would be able to have, good DEI strategy across all organizations. The other important element of the club is mentoring. So PwC Malaysia have collaborated with the 30% Club for the last 7 years with the board mentoring scheme. I think this is important, so as our women leaders are going to be board ready. So there isn't any point in having the numbers, but the quality is not there. So we want to make sure that they are ready before they get onto boards. There has been 8 cohorts which have been successfully completed, and 106 female leaders have sort of gone through that. And many of them are already sitting on boards.
So I think that is also testament to not just the success of the program, but the fact that you're actually looking at the impacts happening in real time, right? Thank you for that, Nurul. Now, let's go into whether or not gender parity, how is it defined? And yes, we've been talking a lot about 30%. I think this entire month has been filled with such discussions. But at the same time, is 30% a ceiling of sort as well? A glass ceiling in a sense, right?
Yeah, I think there has been a lot of misconception about 30%. But the main objective of the name 30% Club, 30% is not meant to be a quota, nor is it meant to be a ceiling. It's meant to be the tipping point, the floor, I would say, before any underrepresented group, and in this case, gender, where the voice can be heard. So as you mentioned, is 30% enough? It is a start of a journey, right? We have achieved it for the first 100 big PLCs, but we still have 850 more to go to convince. And when we talk about parity, 30% is not the end.
It's not 50%, right?
Yeah, so there's a long way more to go. On top of that, I've also shared the statistics about CEOs or senior, the C-suite. That's also another challenge which I think going forward needs to be addressed. So in PwC, for example, when I first joined PwC more than 25 years ago, there was a handful of female directors and partners. I think the DEI culture has always been a strategy of the firm. And, when we want to achieve a target, I think a lot of the processes and the policies need to be in place to be able to achieve that target. And I think that has been what has been happening in PwC. I was a beneficiary of that program where, we are mentored both by female and male allies. And, just to share with you, we had a target of 45% partner admission for female last year. We have exceeded that. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So, when you have the infrastructure in place, if you have the processes in place, and if the message is from the top, I think that would be able to be successful.
Exactly, and thank you very much for also sharing how your personal experiences within the PwC framework is actually what brought you to where you are today. Because infrastructure, of course, is ultimately what is really key. And I think you can set quotas, for example, but if roughly about 800 or so companies are not able really to meet them, we have to question some deeper issues at play, right? From there, Nurul, moving along to asking you about, so the glass ceiling is one point, but at the same time, the glass cliff is also another terminology which has come into parlance. And we have really actually been able to observe this not just globally but in Malaysia, whereby women, C-suite and executive level figures are brought into place during critical key shift moments, such as, of course, the pandemic. But at the same time, now that we are in the tail end of all of those things, ever since the late 2022 itself, actually, we've seen a drop-off, and those same women who were in very high-flying positions were then very quickly removed from those positions once the initial crisis was over. Any thoughts on this?
You know, when we talk about, senior positions occupied by women during the time of crisis, there's only two things, two possibilities. One, is it the realization that, actually female makes better leaders? Or, the other, the other thought is, are we, trying to set her up to fail? Yeah, and I hope it is the former.
Hopefully so, yes, but the latter also does seem to be somewhat on just below the surface.
So, to ensure or to make sure that it doesn't happen, to make sure that the latter doesn't happen, I think it is a very long process which we need to think about. We have talked to a few of the women leaders, and I think there are three things which I think is very important. I think the first point is on mentoring and sponsorship. How do you help a woman potential leader to navigate, the complex situations or, situations where there are crises? I think the other point which is very important is to have very good DEI culture within an organization. If the culture is not there, right, making a female a senior person it's like its own crisis on its own.
Yes, setting up for failure, as you mentioned.
And I think the third point is, to make sure that, there are programs, there are leadership skills which, which are communicated and which are taught to, any potential women leaders in an organization. I think that infrastructure has to be in place so as they are going to be ready to take on the reign of the organization.
Exactly. And I think we will get into this a little deeper during the next part of the discussion, but also it has been noted by various global surveys that companies that have more than 30% of women on their executive teams, they are significantly more likely to actually financially outperform less gender diverse teams by anywhere between 10 to even 30%. So all of this is actually telling us that there is actually a financial kickback in a sense, or there is a business imperative to ensure better gender balance in the boardrooms, right?
So PwC is one very good example.
Fair.
I sit on the senior leadership team, and I think within the team we have 20% who are female members sitting on the team, and I can assure you that the discussions covers all angles, because everyone would have different views of how they decide on crucial issues. I think having dissenting views can be positive, because you would have different insights, which is very key in terms of decision making. If everyone thinks alike, you may not have covered many of the other aspects which is not thought through.
Exactly. And I think it's diverse perspectives is one side of it, but those diverse perspectives leading to bolder or even more fiscally sound decisions is another. I'll end by just saying that another data point shows that there's actually a 48% differential in performance when it comes to the most and the least gender diverse boards. Right.
As you mentioned, there has been a lot of research, favorable correlation between having a diverse board and performance. One of the key reasons could be, the nature of men and women are different. I think we tend to be a lot more discerning. And, where we talk about
the nuance.
Where we talk about the issue on ESG, I think the observation is that, where there are diverse thinking, where there are women on boards, there tend to be lesser risk of greenwashing claims. and the risk of closing an eye on unethical issue, that reduces, because there are a lot more diverse thinking and consideration.
Exactly, and also a lot more, I would say, just from my judgment, a lot more female experts working in the arena of ESG.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
We take a quick break now. We'll be right back with the rest of the discussion on Niaga Spotlight, focusing on gender balance in boardrooms. Welcome back to Niaga Spotlight. Still with me, Tehmina Kaoosji, and of course I have today Nurul and Abdul Latif in the studios with PwC Malaysia, the Executive Chair, speaking about gender balance in boardrooms. So Nurul, moving a little bit deeper into one argument often made against increasing gender diversity on boards is the perceived lack of suitable female candidates or tokenistic appointments, as we say. Now, you did touch briefly upon it, so let's perhaps look at what are some ways to respond to this in a deeper manner.
Yeah. Tokenism is something which we don't believe in. I think it would be an insult if you were told that you are there or you're in that position just because of your gender.
Meritocracy is the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, in any organization, and in particular, I can say that for PwC, it is all based on merit. There is no consideration at all about whether you are male or female, or just because I have a target, I have to promote X number of female. That has not come up at all. I think in terms of organization and board directorship, yes, there is that encouragement from the regulators as well as institutional investors about meeting those targets. But based on my discussions with many of the NRC members, they want to try to reach that target. But on top of that, it's also based on whether they are capable or they have the right expertise to be able to contribute to the boards.
Exactly. You should also be, of course, fit for the purpose, right? And I think it goes against saying, yes, perhaps there are some criticisms that it may be tokenistic, but clearly, in general, women often are actually overqualified when they are put in any kind of a role. So from there, going into another issue, which you mentioned before briefly, that only 2 or so were actually female CEOs. How can organizations address gender disparities in promotion rates? Because this also ties in quite deeply with, of course, the fact that we only really talk about work-life balance when it comes to working mothers, not working fathers.
Yeah. In terms of the statistics, it's quite baffling because 50% of our workforce are females.
Yes.
So why is it that it has leaked so much at the end of the journey? And as you mentioned, there are challenges in terms of the career lifespan of anyone, and what is important is that an organization need to have the proper infrastructure and policies and culture to ensure that everyone is included. So the PwC International Women's Day theme of inclusion matters. I think it's very important. Diversity doesn't go anywhere without inclusion, and with inclusion, I think it has shown that women will have the tendency, 2 times the tendency to want to learn new skills, who want to who want to go higher in terms of the organization, right? And I think that's very important when you mention about the challenges. I think we need to cater for challenges at different aspects of life to make sure that there is retention, so as there is enough pipeline at the end of the day. So for example, in PwC, majority of our female employees are in the less than 30% age group. I think that is where people start they start work and they start having families.
Correct.
And I think the challenges are different between that group and the next block, which is the 30 to 40, where they have children growing up, they may have elderly parents to take care of, and the challenges are also very different beyond the 40 years old, right? So at different stages in the career, there are different challenges, and I think it is up to the organization to have initiatives or program to be able to help them overcome those challenges.
Exactly.
Right?
So perhaps to fill those gaps. If I may, another thing which is also being observed due to, of course, Malaysia's natural demographic trends. We are also now an aging nation, meaning which another dimension to care work, which is done primarily again by women, regardless of whether they are homemakers or whether they are professional women. We now, there is also an additional burden of elderly or senior care that is added on. From what you have observed, Nurul, whether within PwC or within other organizations that you've had the privilege of supervising, do we have any kind of infrastructure that can be built upon for this to be more inclusive, so that it's not automatically going to fall upon women while we are still waiting for the services and the care available to be built?
Yeah, you know what I'm very clear of is the initiatives by PwC. I think many years ago we already had the foresight in terms of the challenges of our people. I think more than 80% of my employees are at the age of 40 and lesser.
Right, that's a significant proportion.
Yeah. So, you know, we understand that, you know, it is not just work, and even for myself, you know, I have a family, it's always work and family. And that's where we introduce the flex initiatives in the firm.
Right.
Where, you know, you can work whenever you want to work, you can work wherever you want to work, obviously with appropriate approvals, taking into account clients' deadlines and requirements. And that gives people some time to be, you know, that leeway to manage between working and sorting out some of their family matters. In terms of the sharing of responsibility of childcare or elderly family care, I think we are also one of the first companies to introduce the 90-day maternity leave and the 30-day paternity leave. And it's not consecutive. You can take it within that 1 year of, you know, the first year of the child. You know, you have your medical checkups to bring to, you know, if the child falls sick. So these are just some of the initiatives which, you know, we try to introduce so as, you know, people can manage their work-life balance. And, you know, it's also a great retention tool, right? As you mentioned, not everyone, you know, every organization would have different challenges and affordability. So, for example, I know some of the more established organizations where they have childcare centers or nursery for their employee.
Fair.
For us, maybe it may not be very feasible, and that's why we have, you know, other initiatives to make sure that, you know, some of their challenges can be, you know, we can help with some of the challenges in something which, you know, we can afford.
Exactly. Now, I think definitely what needs to be, you know, really publicized is the fact that you are already offering 30 days paternity, which is significantly higher than the currently mandated 7 days. But of course, that only applies to Semenanjung, Peninsula Malaysia. Thank you for that, Nurul. Now, Nurul, another thing that, let's talk about this. Now, board seats are also often filled via networking, which happens, of course, at the highest levels of the corporate sector. Now, there may or may not be much availability for women who are climbing the corporate ladder to be able to avail themselves of such networking opportunities. What are your thoughts on some alternatives to this to also ensure that talented, hardworking women are not overlooked just because they may not always be available to be present at such networking opportunities, which can be also quite gendered in nature?
So two things which comes into mind.
Sure.
I think just taking on my own journey, you know, as a woman, sometimes the thought is, I'll just work and, you know, go back.
Sure.
But as one climbs the career ladder, you know, it has to be more than that. And I think I was quite fortunate that, you know, within PwC we have this culture where, you know, everyone takes care of each other's back. And I have, I have mentors and male allies who actually bring me to their network, and, you know, make the introduction so as, you know, the profile, you know, people know who I am and what I do. And I think this is the same platform which the 30% Club, you know, I see that happening. We do have a network of women leaders, and, you need to believe me, there are a number of male allies within the 30% club. And one of the key elements of the board mentoring session is that the mentors are meant to provide access to their network to the mentees, right?
That's right,
So
correct.
that, within the corporate circle, everyone knows that this is an upcoming female leader who is capable and will be considered, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you are actually emphasize the importance of male champions
Yeah.
and the huge role, and not only that, but following by example, because that encourages others who may not perhaps have considered this
Yeah.
or to actually change their mind about it. Thank you. Now, moving along into discussing another final area. So we are, of course, speaking about women on the boards. But at the same time, what are your thoughts on other ways in which we can ensure that the lower end of the pipeline is being cultivated and that you're having women who are much younger, perhaps even the fresh employees who are in their mid to late 20s, are actually being nurtured in the right way?
I think that it's very important for each organization to have that culture because it cannot just stop at the senior level. I think when you have, policies and initiatives in place, the employees will feel that inclusion, right? And they will be, confident in terms of going forward in their career. I think what is also important, we talk about mentoring, sponsorship, having a role model, would give that confidence that, hey, if someone can make it, I can also make it in future. And one of the key consideration in terms of the talent life cycle, company will have to look at it in a more holistic manner from in the point of attracting, recruiting, and retention. I think when one knows that we are well taken care within our career, I think that is where the young employees will know that there is a path for me in the organization, and that is where you build your pipeline.
Exactly, correct. And when it comes to diversity, of course, we don't just mean gender, because let's say within the next decade or so, everyone on boards around Malaysia and globally will definitely be of a slightly younger cohort.
Yeah.
So while we have so much of a focus on ensuring that women leaders make their way through, how do we also ensure that we're inculcating an equally sensitized male generation of future leaders?
The tone comes from the top. I think if an organization has a good DEI culture and talk about inclusion, I think then there will be no differentiation between male and female.
Correct.
It is just merit. And I think even for us in PwC, where we deal with a diverse group of people in terms of racial and in terms of gender.
That's right.
We all have to be very sensitive in terms of how we, encourage, different behaviors. A lot of this cannot be made mandatory, but it has to come from the top. It has to be led by example. I just give you an example. It may not be gender, but talking in a language which everyone understands.
Yes.
Right? We can't restrict one from talking
Fair
in their
enough.
mother tongue, but the message from the top must be, please speak in a language which everyone understands, so as they don't feel discriminated or excluded in any discussion, especially if it's work. Yeah.
Exactly.
So so that culture, that inclusion culture, is very important. We can talk about any diversity, gender, racial, or age. Yeah.
Fair.
But inclusion, I think, plays a very key part.
Exactly. Nurul, I have actually, honestly, so much more that we could speak about, but I think that helps draw a really good nutshell about the progress that has been made. Thank you so much for your time and for your incredible work in so far.
Thank you, Tehmina, for having me here today.
Absolutely. Well, that's all we have time for today. We will, of course, be back next Friday with more business analysis and insights right here on Niaga Spotlight. I'm Tehmina Kaoosji signing off and wishing everyone a productive week ahead.